Dawn had just broken in Austin, and the kitchen still smelled of freshly brewed coffee. Ethan stood at the counter, holding a thick letter from the company, his voice calm as if he were talking about the weather. "Hey, Carter, I think with the paltry amount you earn each month, you should consider staying home and taking care of this family." I set my cup down, the clink of porcelain on stone very soft. "What do you mean?" "Simple. I've been promoted to vice president. You know what the pressure is like at that level. You should seriously think about leaving your current place and switching to support me. Focus on the family." I looked through the window toward downtown, the penthouse tower reflecting the early sun, the apartment titled to my Carter and Comer's Advisory LLC from before the wedding. "Are you talking about money or about something else?" "About the standard of living," he replied, folding the letter, pulling out a chair, as if he had already concluded a meeting. I didn't argue. I opened the cupboard for the cereal box, poured almond milk, wiped the crumbs on the table. "This weekend I have a mentoring session for the community startup group," I said. "Cancel it," he cut in. "You always look busy with little things. You're smart. But if you keep clinging to those projects, you'll always be behind." I looked up. "You're calling everything I do little things?" "Compared to my path? Yes." I inhaled slowly. I clearly remembered the day I signed to buy this apartment, when I was still single, the contracts I read line by line myself. I remembered each of Carter and Cody's first clients. The evenings sitting at the dining table drafting financial plans for them late into the night. "I don't need to hang a title to feel I have value," I said evenly. Ethan sneered. "That line only sounds good on a podcast. In real life, numbers say it all." I cleared the tabletop, opened the small locked cabinet, and took out the charcoal-colored file folder. Apartment papers, tax receipts, the long-term lease contract I had negotiated last week. I didn't hold it up. I just kept it in my hand as a reminder to myself of one thing. Silence is not weakness. It's merely not yet time to speak. And when I speak, I will speak with things no one can bend. "Will you have breakfast?" I asked softly. Ethan flicked his hand, picked up his coat. The door closed. I poured more coffee, stood still for a beat, then opened the calendar on my phone. From today on, a big question mark had appeared in my heart about my own marriage. The next morning, Patricia texted in the family group, "This weekend, the Reed family is having a party to celebrate the director position. Ava, dress appropriately for your status." I replied, "Noted." Ethan forwarded the company's invitation email, adding, "This is a good opportunity for you to meet the boss's wife. They run funds, sit on boards and such. Go learn." I put the phone down, opened Carter and Coder's work calendar, finalized 2 mentoring sessions in East Austin, and a call with the owner of a machine shop in San Marcos. An hour later, I headed out the door, giving a brief reminder. "Don't forget tonight is our 6-year anniversary. I booked a table at Olive and June last week." Ethan tightened his tie, glanced in the mirror. "Olive and June? At this level, that's a bit not quite up to our standing." That anniversary evening began with that line and continued with similar ones. "You've worn this dress before," he said as the server poured water. I answered, "I like it." When the main course arrived, Ethan leaned in. "I've been carrying the finances all along. It's time you picked up the pace." The bill sat in the middle of the table. He touched it, then pulled his hand back. "Can you take the card? The bonus hasn't come in yet." I smiled lightly. "Okay." I paid with my company card, noting it separately to categorize at the end of the month. We walked to the parking lot. Ethan sighed. "I want a bigger picture for both of us." I said, "I want that too, in my own way." 6 years of marriage are a series of networking parties, stories about the boss's wife doing charity, organizing auctions, photos taken standing next to a backdrop. Patricia likes evenings like that, wearing high heels, heavy perfume, a glittering bracelet. She told me before each event, "You should talk less, smile more, tell light stories. Don't talk about the books. It sounds tiring." When she learned I worked at a small CPA office, she nodded. "Bookkeeper is fine, but don't become a paperwork person forever. A director's wife should look the part." I just nodded to end the conversation. Little collisions accumulate faster than people think. One Sunday evening, Patricia looked around the dining table and pointed at the menu of the restaurant Ethan had chosen. "At this stage, don't eat at such low-end places. Ethan's clients are all on the upper tier." Ethan laughed along. "Right. Adjust your taste for me." I didn't argue. I took out my wallet and put my card down when the server returned. No one noticed who paid. Another time, Ethan told the group of friends, "I cover the housing costs. She handles the little bills." I silently chewed a piece of bread, recalling that on the previous Monday morning it was I who transferred the HOA payment for the penthouse from the company account. I had also scheduled the property taxes to be paid automatically this quarter. I didn't claim credit. I kept the books. Outwardly, I am reserved, not showy. A bookkeeper at a local CPA. The office business card has my name. A short title enough to answer the question, "What do you do?" Inside, my real job is as a temporary financial navigator for medium and large businesses that are stuck, an outsourced CFO-type role. I run Carter & Coer's Advisory LLC, established 4 years before the wedding. My clients are diverse: a food distribution company, a packaging printer, a building materials chain. I don't call what I do by convoluted terminology when it's not needed. I tell business owners, we look at money in, money out. Who pays when? Who has owed for how long? What needs to stop? What should be kept? I go into the warehouse to check inventory, sit with their accountants, and speak human language, not conference language. My premarital assets are clear, clean, and fully documented. $700,000 saved from the first consulting contracts, plus a small dividend from an early investment in a former classmate's company, all held in the LLC, and a personal trust. From that money, I put down the deposit on the penthouse in downtown Austin. The deed is in the name of Carter & Coer's Advisory LLC. The Tesla Model Y I'm driving is a lease through the company, expenses and insurance categorized properly. I keep everything tidy, not to flaunt it in a fight, but to protect it legally and keep the marriage from turning into a contest of comparisons. I've never told Patricia about the LLC. She hasn't asked. I also don't see the need to talk about money before dinner. But silence does not mean I don't see or don't know. I remember vividly last week when Ethan revised the story in front of a crowd. I cover most of the actionable costs. Ava is in the passion stage of community work. I smiled, nodded, but afterward texted the client's assistant, "Can we move tomorrow night's meeting to 7 p.m.? I wanted not to answer work during my husband's party. I managed that. But I don't let people inject a false story into me. Patricia understands her influence in every meeting. The night before the promotion party, she called, not beating around the bush. "Pick a new dress. The old black one makes you sink." I answered, "I'll wear what I feel comfortable in." She paused a beat. "Don't be stubborn. You know how people look at the wife." I replied, "People should look at how my husband works rather than the dress I wear." She gave an unhappy laugh. "That's why you're just a bookkeeper." I didn't respond. I let the call end because I didn't want to add more energy. On the morning of the party, before leaving, Ethan found me in the kitchen. "I want you to be proactive tonight. Talk to the boss's wife." "I need a team." I asked, "Do you need a team or a photograph?" He frowned. You always turn everything into principles. I lifted my glass of water. Principles keep people clear. He put on his jacket, patted my shoulder as a reminder. Don't bring the mood down. I arrived earlier than he did. The lobby of the Broadmoor Hotel was noisy, yellow lit. The registration table set right at the entrance. I stood in a corner, observing. The boss's wife, the person Patricia wanted me to learn from, was standing and chatting with two sponsors. She asked the server's name and praised them with a short sentence. That small action said more than a photograph. When Ethan walked in, he bent to greet each table, his eyes checking where I was. I stepped over. Congratulations. He looked me up and down. Nodded. Fine. I smiled. Thank you for the grade. When everyone sat down, Patricia sat next to me and held out her phone showing a photo of a necklace. This suits you. A woman with the right taste will help her husband go far. I looked straight at her. A wife who respects herself and her husband is what helps him go far. She turned away muttering, debating is exhausting. In the middle of the meal, Ethan raised his glass and spoke about his journey upward, naming his boss and colleagues. I applauded when appropriate, not inserting a word. After the speech, he leaned toward me. See, this is my field. I nodded. I see. He lowered his voice. And what's your field? Drop those small projects. I spoke slowly. My field is 5 companies asking me to clear their jams. Next week, I will close a deal that will keep 40 people employed. He smiled thinly. You sound like a wall newsletter. I exhaled. You sound like a speech. 2 days later, during a client meeting, I sat at the old wooden table of the San Marcos machine shop. The owner, hair gray, showed me the invoices and payment schedule. I can't breathe. My son wants to close. I said, we won't close yet. We stop what's unnecessary, talk again with the suppliers, stretch the payment schedule a bit. He looked at me. Can you do it? I nodded. I do it because I've done this many times. I called the 2 major suppliers, laid out the situation clearly, made no overpromises. I called the bank, proposing a reasonable option. I returned to Austin around 9 p.m., ate a cold sandwich, sat down at the table, and recorded each call. The house was quiet. I looked out the window at the distant penthouse, the building I put the deposit on with my own money, the papers I keep in the safe. I didn't feel the need to tell anyone that at the time. I only saw one thing. Silence helps me do my part thoroughly, without being dragged into comparison games. On Friday night, Ethan came home late. He set his briefcase down and opened the liquor cabinet. I've been invited to the golf course with the board. If you're free on Sunday, come along. I shook my head. On Sunday, I have a free financial clinic for the small business group in East Austin. He laughed. What do you get from doing that? I told the truth. I do it because it's the way I stay in the profession without selling what I believe. He put his glass on the table, tilted his head. I can't live with a wife who earns less. The sentence from that dawn returned like a clean copy. I replied, You've said that already. As for me, I haven't. I will not live with a husband who ties his wife's value to how much she earns this quarter. That night, I opened the safe and took out the thin file labeled Carter and Cummern's Premarital Funds and Penthouse Deed. I didn't take them out to throw on the table. I reviewed them to remind myself, I am not small. I called the lawyer who set up the LLC back then, just to be sure. Nothing to update. She said, everything is correct. I closed the safe, wrote one line in the notebook. No need to announce. Just be ready. The next morning, Patricia texted, Come by my house today. There are important guests. Remember to say you work at a CPA. I replied, I will say it accurately. I advise businesses on finance. She called back immediately. Don't overdo it. Sounds like bragging. I stayed calm. That's my job. I don't need to brag, and I don't need to hide. She was silent for a few seconds. Up to you. I went to her house, bringing a cake. At the table, a guest asked, "What does Ava do?" I said, "I help businesses rearrange their money so they don't have to close." The person nodded. Sounds useful. Patricia forced a smile. The girl knows the books. I didn't correct her. I took another serving of salad and talked about the weather. I didn't need to prove anything at this meal. At night, I sent an email to the advisory team. Increase slots next week. We may need to reschedule a few calls. Priya, longtime colleague, replied, "Are you okay?" I answered, "Okay. Please prepare the deck for Wednesday's session for me." She replied, "Okay. One day soon, I will make it clear to Ethan what I have, what I choose, what I do not negotiate. Not to be better or worse, so that he understands that value is not in this week's paycheck, nor in a dress or a necklace. It lies in how we do our part right and respect the part of the person beside us. And if that's not possible, I am already ready. Next week, there is a family meeting and an appointment with the bank of a major client. I know which one is more important. And I also know I will not be silent forever. When I open my mouth, I will say it correctly, sufficiently, and without raising my voice. On Tuesday evening, I came home earlier than usual to prepare materials for the next morning's meeting. Ethan's phone was on the kitchen island, the speaker on because he was rummaging in the closet for a jacket before heading to the gym. I don't have the habit of eavesdropping, but Patricia's voice rang clearly in the quiet kitchen. You have to think long-term. Cut dead weight. The two of you have career incompatibility. Tell the lawyer that outright. Ethan lowered his voice. I've called Harrison Blackwood. He said in Texas it's easy. I just need to prove she earns less, contributes less. Patricia answered immediately. Right. Don't let her drag you down. I stood still, peeling the label on a water bottle until the edge tore, not stepping in. Ethan saw me, pressed the button to turn off the speaker, and deflected. Mom's asking about the party. I nodded, picked up the stack of documents, and went straight to the office. That night, when he was showering, I went into the dressing room to get a coat and saw a fresh stack of papers placed on the shelf in the closet. The pages were printed from Harrison Blackwood's website, the Quick Asset Division section highlighted in large letters. Tucked in the middle was a handwritten his-hers sheet of his bonus, joint savings account, penthouse, deposit after marriage, Tesla, family car, electronics, liquor collection, hers, necklace from mom, a few paintings, income from bookkeeping. I held the paper, looking at the line where penthouse was assigned to his, with deposit after marriage, added in parentheses, the question mark, like a shove. I took a photo, put the paper back where it was. I opened the drawer below and saw a few more pages. Divorce preparation checklist. Bullet points, change passwords, gather documents, gradually unwind finances. I closed the closet, returning the whole room to its original posture. From that moment, I switched modes. No arguing, no lecturing. I worked as if I were auditing my own house. I pulled out an empty suitcase, sorted binder files, deed in HOA, LLC and trust, premarital funds, penthouse payments, source of funds, car, lease through LLC, joint account, history of inflows, charts outflows. I turned on the scanner, rescanned the originals, named the files by date. I enabled two-factor authentication for the work email and the LLC's bank accounts, checked the list of logged-in devices, removed unfamiliar ones. I moved the original documents into the safe and updated the list kept at the bank. I wrote a simple timeline, wedding date date of forming the pre-marital LLC, date of signing the deposit contract, date the deed was transferred to the LLC, times Ethan asked me to pay for special dinners, with which card. I added no commentary. I only recorded events and evidence. The next morning, I called Marcus Chin, my college friend, now a tax attorney. I need a second set of eyes, I said. Marcus came to my office in East Austin, taking off his cap as he smiled. You still like working in a space that smells of wood. I showed him the structural diagram. The LLC formed 4 years before the wedding. The personal trust? The penthouse purchased with funds in the LLC. All HOA payments, property taxes, and repairs paid from the LLC account. The car lease in the LLC's name. Marcus went through each item. Good. This is separate property from before marriage. The only issue that could be disputed is commingling if joint funds were used to pay for separate property. I opened the spreadsheet. All major expenses are from the LLC. Joint funds are used for living expenses and items he chooses, with receipts. Marcus nodded. Keep it as is. Don't change the payment patterns. And don't pre-explain. If they're mistaken, let them write the mistake into the record themselves. At noon, I met my younger sister, Sarah Carter, at a cafe on South Congress. Sarah is a contracts attorney, careful and direct. I summarized briefly. They likely have spoken to a lawyer. There's a false his/hers sheet. There was a call about dead weight. Sarah set down her coffee spoon, speaking slowly. You don't need to teach them the law. Your job is the timeline, receipts, and a calm tone. I'll draft a respect and boundaries letter to Ethan. Confirm the separate assets. Request that he not unilaterally collect or remove documents, and route all financial exchanges through email for a log. No accusations, no provocation. I nodded. Do it for me. Sarah asked, Do you want to specify the LLC and the trust in the letter? I paused a beat. Just mention that separate assets are protected by law. No details. Let them fill in the blanks themselves. Sarah smiled slightly. That's how you let the other side mire themselves in assumptions. That night, I received another suggestion from Marcus. If needed, hire someone to verify on the ground at Ethan's company. Not for attack, just to understand the risk. I texted a private investigator my client had used before, Maria Ruiz. I need to check Ethan Reed's current job. Title, Director, Performance, Disciplinary Risk. Do not cross boundaries. Maria replied, Give me 72 hours. I'll report back with a summary. I didn't push. I just shut down the computer and went to bed early. On Friday morning, Sarah sent a draft letter in a conversational tone. Ethan, to avoid misunderstandings, from today please conduct all financial communications between the two spouses via email. Ava confirms that the premarital assets belong to Carter and Coburn Advisory LLC and the personal trust. The related documents are kept in the safe. Please do not move or copy these files. If you need to view them, please make an appointment. Ava has no intention of arguing. She respects your work and hopes to be respected in the same way. After reading it, I changed only one word, from please to kindly. Sarah messaged, Send it at 9:15 when everyone's at work. I hit send. 5 minutes later, Ethan replied, You're making this a big deal. I just want to talk. Sarah pinged me. Don't respond while he's heated. Wait till noon. Around noon, Ethan called. I picked up, turned on the speaker in my office, and set the phone on the desk. Are you planning to drag a lawyer into this? He opened. I haven't mentioned a lawyer, I said softly. I'm stating boundaries. Separate assets are protected. All exchanges by email. He sighed. Please don't turn marriage into a contract. I replied, A durable marriage is thanks to clear agreements. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm just stopping the miscounting. He paused a beat. I hate the feeling of being controlled, I said. I also hate the feeling of being mischaracterized. The call ended without a blow-up. I entered into the timeline. Sent letter, reply, tone, content. I didn't write any additional feelings. My feelings were reserved for tonight, when I packed another box of personal items in case I needed to move quickly. On Monday, Maria sent a brief report via secure email. Summary: the director title is only 4 months old, previously manager. Internally, there is word that Ethan is in an unofficial performance improvement program after 2 late projects. His direct manager has noted lack of cooperation with colleagues. There is no termination record, but there is risk. I read it, not pleased. I don't like seeing anyone on the verge of losing their job, including my husband. But I needed the truth to know what he means by carrying. I forwarded the report to Sarah and Marcus. Marcus messaged back. All the more reason not to touch the separate assets. Keep everything clean. Sarah added, and let them write out their assumptions. Don't rush to correct. In the evening, Ethan came home late. He opened the closet and saw the stack of papers was still there. He turned to me. You went into my closet? I replied. The other day, I needed to get a coat. I photographed the papers because they were incorrect. The penthouse belongs to the LLC I formed before marriage. The lease for the car is in my company's name. Don't mix them up. He growled. So you finally get to show off. I stayed calm. I'm not showing off. I'm just correcting the record. I kept quiet because I thought there was no need to one-up. But I will not let anyone write incorrectly about my assets. He leaned back in the chair, gave a thin smile. You think I'm in it for the money? I said plainly, I think you're listening to words that are leading you to bad decisions. He was silent. After a moment, he said, Let's talk tomorrow. I nodded. By email. The next morning, I received an email from Harrison Blackwood to Ethan. Ethan forwarded it to me by mistake, due to the system's suggestion. I only read the subject line, did not download the file. Should collect evidence of financial contributions, compile a list of joint separate assets. I did not respond. I sent it to Sarah immediately for record keeping. Sarah called. Do not copy anything, okay? Let them handle it themselves. I said, okay. Then I opened a new folder. Counterparty Communications, log. I wrote, date, 8:12 a.m. Mistaken forward, subject line only. During the week, I made time to meet Marcus again. We sat at a PHO place on Lamar. Marcus said, I'm not talking about divorce. I'm talking about legal facts. You're fine on the separate property part. As for the joint account, I recommend keeping spending at the same level as the past 6 months. No major changes. Don't move money around randomly. Everything can be scrutinized. I nodded. I'm keeping it as is. Marcus asked, Do you want to open a new personal account to receive compensation from upcoming contracts? I replied, No, everything still goes to the LLC as before. I don't want to create the image of moving money around. Marcus laughed. That's the CFO way. In the afternoon, Sarah sent me a small file, calm checklist, 5 items. 1. Communicate by email. Keep a neutral tone. 2. Do not teach the law to the other side. 3. Save every receipt. Do not explain feelings. 4. Keep the normal rhythm of life, work, eating and sleeping, exercise. 5. When provoked, write a draft and let it sit for 24 hours. I printed it out and stuck it next to the screen. At night, I opened the window and looked toward downtown. The penthouse was still there, a fixed point in a picture with many moving parts. I no longer felt the need to hide behind the bookkeeper business card. but I also didn't feel the need to stand in the middle of the living room and read out the account balances. I chose to follow the strategy that both Marcus and Sarah kept emphasizing: calm, record keeping, and letting the other side reveal themselves. If they believe in a false story, they will sign their name under that story. As for me, I only need to be correct on my part. The correct signature, the correct timing. And when that time comes, I will speak. Clearly, sufficiently, without raising my voice. The at-home mediation session took place on Saturday afternoon. Harrison Blackwood arrived 10 minutes early, stepping into the living room like someone inspecting a model home. He brushed his fingers lightly along the arm of a chair, glanced through the glass door at the shared pool, and nodded at the painting on the wall. "This unit has a good view," he said as if making a note. Ethan drew the curtains, plugged an HDMI cable from the laptop into the TV, and invited everyone to sit. I set out a water carafe and glasses, placed an extra stack of blank paper and pens in the middle of the table. Sarah had advised me beforehand. Let them lay everything out. Don't argue. Nod so they reveal their hand. Ethan pulled up the first slide. Financial incompatibility. The words were large, and beneath them were 2 bar charts. Husband's income, wife's income. Then, lifestyle contributions. He pointed at the screen. As I said, this is the gap. You choose community projects, I carry the rest. Harrison added, we are trying to maintain fairness and efficiency. A reasonable division of assets is. He flipped to the proposed division slide. The penthouse, the Tesla, the liquor collection, the family investment account, 2 watches, into the his column, personal effects, the jewelry set from mother, cash $25,000, into the hers column. Ethan continued reading. Ava will move out of the apartment within 10 days. No support. Supplementary credit cards used by Ava will be closed. Patricia FaceTimed Ethan's phone. He set it face down on the table but kept the call connected. I'll say just one thing. Don't go soft. Her voice carried through the speaker. Harrison cleared his throat. Ms. Carter, do you have anything you'd like to respond? I laced my fingers and spoke evenly. I would like to receive a hard copy of the proposed division to read. I will not respond orally. Harrison slid the printed stack over. I reviewed each page and penciled a note in the lower corner. Received for review. Do not agree with contents. I initialed each page with AC, noting the time and date. Ethan frowned. What are you doing? I looked at him, acknowledging receipt of the documents. Nothing more, nothing less. Harrison shifted to a conciliation tone. We are relying on common assumptions. The penthouse is the marital residence. The car is shared. Investments arose during the marriage. I looked up. If it's an assumption, mark it clearly as an assumption. When evidence is required, I will provide it. Today is the session to hear your side present. Harrison nodded, gathered the papers, and closed with, we hope you will consider this for the benefit of both parties. I gave a polite smile. I always consider. The meeting ended after an hour. Ethan turned off the TV. Harrison shook hands, then paused at the door to ask, can we set Monday to sign an agreement in principle? I replied, I will respond by email. He nodded and headed for the elevator. I cleared the glasses, gathered the tissues into the trash. Ethan leaned against the kitchen, exhaling as if he had just thrown a stone off his chest. The next morning at 7:12, my phone rang non-stop. Harrison called 3 times in a row. I picked up and put it on speaker on the kitchen counter. Ms. Carter, I need to verify immediately. The condo deed is in the name of Carter and Coer's Advisory LLC. I checked the Travis County records. HOA and property taxes are paid from an LLC account. The Tesla lease is in the LLC's name. The family investment account is in fact a business account. His column needs to be entirely revised. I poured coffee and answered briefly. Yes. He spoke like someone who had just lost his footing. And Mr. Reed? I glanced down the hall. Ethan, hair still wet, phone in hand, eyes darting. Harrison changed tone. Ethan, listen. An authorized user is not an owner. Yesterday you presented based on incorrect assumptions. We need to stop all communications without counsel right now. Ethan turned off the speaker and pressed the phone to his ear. Harrison, what are you saying? I set a plate of eggs in front of him, opened my laptop, and angled the screen toward the kitchen. I opened the deed and HOA folder, clicked on the PDF of 2 years of HOA ledgers. Field, payer, Carter & Co. Advisory, LLC. I opened lease, Tesla. Signatory, Ava Carter, manager. Ethan swallowed. You did all of this? I moved on to the tax 7 years folder, opened each federal return by year, and scrolled to the signature page. Look at this line. I pointed. Signature of taxpayer. His name. I scrolled down to the schedules. Schedule C, Carter & COSA, Advisory LLC. Schedule E, income, expenses related to rental property, if any. You have signed 7 times. I enunciated each word so I wouldn't have to repeat it. Ethan's phone flashed. Patricia calling. He put it on speaker. What is this? Harrison just messaged me that there's a small hiccup, but why is it this tangled? Patricia went straight to attack. Ava, you're playing word games. I replied slowly. There are no games. There are documents. Everything is public and lawful. I'm not hiding anything. You can ask Harrison to send copies of the Travis County records and the tax returns bearing Ethan's signature. She snapped. Why didn't you say so from the start? I looked out the window. Because I didn't want to turn a marriage into a balance sheet. But when I'm mischaracterized, I am compelled to bring out the paperwork. She blew out a breath. What about the penthouse? I cut in, my voice still steady. The penthouse is an asset of the LLC I formed before marriage. Ethan is an authorized user, not an owner. From today, all exchanges via email. I opened a file I had prepared last night after the pseudo-professional meeting. Notice of change in occupancy, 30 days. Sarah had adjusted the wording for readability. Thong bao thai joy lu tru 30 ningai. I printed 2 copies, signed Ava Carter, manager, Carter & Co. Advisory LLC, and placed one in front of Ethan. What is this? He asked, his eyes shifting from anger to confusion. A notice per procedure, I said. I'm giving you 30 days to arrange new housing. During those 30 days, you will still stay here as a permitted guest. Do not move documents. Do not remove items from the home without an inventory. No bringing strangers in after 10 p.m. All repair requests go through email. If you wish to remain temporarily after 30 days, we will sign an occupancy agreement at a market rate paid to the LLC while awaiting further decisions. Ethan choked up. You're kicking me out? I shook my head. I am following proper procedure so we don't hurt each other further. The 30 days are for you to arrange things. I don't lock anyone out in the night. Harrison called again. Ethan put it on speaker. Ethan, listen. His voice urgent but gentler than before. You need to stop all statements about carrying the finances until we have sufficient documentation. Given the current situation, any words could end up in the record. I recommend proposing the next meeting at a neutral office, not at home. And my apologies to Miss Carter for yesterday's misunderstanding. I replied, I accept the apology. For the next session, please bring the asset list verified against records. No using assumptions. Harrison hurried. Yes, we will re-review. Patricia still wouldn't let go. Ava, I know you're capable, but do you have to go this far? I spoke clearly. I'm not going that far. I am setting boundaries. I was called dead weight and listed under the column, "Leave the home within 10 days." I am responding with paperwork and process. Anyone who finds this heavy-handed is because they were light-handed with the truth before. Silence on the other end. The call ended. Ethan sat down, looking at the 30-day notice. He asked quietly, "Will you keep me if I change?" "I will not promise anything I'm not sure of." "I keep safety and respect here," I said. "The rest we'll discuss later by email after everyone stops relying on bad advice." He nodded for the first time that week, not arguing. "I need to call Harrison back." "Go ahead. I'll step out on the balcony for a bit." I sent a minutes email to Sarah and Marcus. Summary of the morning, screenshots of the tax returns, the signed 30-day notice. Sarah replied immediately. "Tone is very good. No attacks, sufficient facts. Keep the cadence." Marcus added, "Don't change the money flows, and remember to log the calls." At noon, Ethan sent a brief email. "I've spoken with Harrison. We'll meet at his office on Thursday. I want to say that I have misunderstood quite a lot." I replied, "Thursday works. Please bring a verified list and all related documents. I will bring a 7-year cash flow table and a source of funds payment list." I attached a 2-page PDF, summary, ownership and payments, the penthouse source of funds table, the HOA to tax payment schedule, the car lease, the signature of taxpayer line with an image of the ink stamp. Not a single bitter sentence. I don't need it. In the afternoon, Patricia sent a long message. I didn't open it right away. I forwarded it to Sarah, asking her to filter what needed a legal response. Sarah said, "Mostly feelings. No need to reply. Send only one sentence. All financial exchanges kindly via email with a clear subject and attached documents." I did exactly that. In the evening, I cooked, set 2 plates as usual. Ethan showered, came to the table in an old t-shirt, eyes red. He slid the 30-day notice back toward me. "I understand. I'll find a place. But I want to say one thing. I'm sorry." I looked at him, neither pulling my hand away nor placing it over his. "Thank you for that sentence," I said. "The next sentence is an email to your lawyer." That night, I printed another copy of the Calm checklist and taped it inside the kitchen cabinet. Email, no raised voices. Timeline, no tallying credit. Paperwork, no speculation. I underlined one self-reminder. Keep the breathing rhythm. Then I turned off the stove, the living room lights, and stepped into the office. The laptop already had the 7-year cash flow spreadsheet open. I scrolled to the last line and added a note. Date. The other side acknowledges incorrect assumptions. Plan. Meeting at a neutral office. I saved the file, feeling myself settle by half a notch. Not because of winning. Because order is returning to its proper place. What is said has paperwork. What is received has a signature. Departures have a schedule. And tomorrow morning, I will still wake at 6, brew coffee, and prepare materials for the client in San Marcos. My life does not stop because of a financial incompatibility slide. It continues with the list of things to do, line by line, clear. The Thursday meeting at Harrison's office hadn't even arrived yet when the consequences had already run ahead of it. At noon on Tuesday, Ethan sent a curt string of messages. "Harrison is busy. I'm finding 2 more firms." That same afternoon, he slammed the door and stepped into the kitchen, set his phone down hard on the stone surface. "The lawyers here are so difficult." I asked directly, "What did they say?" He shrugged. After reviewing the file, they declined. Said, "There's no basis to attack separate property," and also said something about Malicious competence, not being a legal ground. I took a sip of water. They're right. The other person's being good at what they do isn't the court's fault. He collapsed into a chair, raking his hair. I need time. I pointed to the notice on the table. You have 30 days. I don't lock anyone out overnight. The next day, the condominium's shared mailbox sent a notice. The management office needs to meet with Mr. Reed regarding the parking card. Ethan read it. His face turned ashen. I didn't ask. That afternoon, he received another email from the company. Meeting with HR and compliance. He paced back and forth in the living room, forcing a smile. Probably just a formality. Half an hour later, Maria, the private investigator, sent me a line. Ethan's LinkedIn has just been edited, removing the bullet points about project leadership. The company seems to have conducted a review. I closed the notification and forwarded it to no one. In the evening, Ethan carried 2 large trash bags down to the garage, then carried down another box. The elderly neighbor on the floor below shook his head. Are you moving? Ethan gave a thin smile. Staying with my mother for a while. The man clicked his tongue. Good luck. The glossy director image from a few weeks earlier vanished as quickly as condensation on glass. On the weekend, Ethan moved to Patricia's house. He sent a short text. I'll come by to pick up more shirts. I set aside a neat box labeled Clothes, Ethan, along with a small bag for personal items. When he arrived, I opened the door and pointed to the box. Here. He looked around the house, empty of people but tidy. You repainting? I nodded. Next week. I've scheduled it. He faltered for a second. I'm sorry about the PowerPoint. I only said, thank you for saying that. Nothing more. After the door closed, I opened my to-do list. First item, overhaul the space. On Monday, the painting crew arrived at 8 a.m. I chose a warm light color, clean the moldings, replace the light switches. Ethan's old office, previously for gym equipment and a big screen, became a small studio. A thick yoga mat, wooden shelves for candles and a small speaker, a full-length mirror. I hung a whiteboard in the other corner to write 3 main tasks every morning. Each time the roller passed over the old wall, I felt the house exhale. Not a feeling of changing my life, just the right work. On Wednesday evening, I invited the people who had seen my value from the beginning over for dinner. Marcus and his wife, Jennifer, a CFO in tech, Priya from the advisory group, Sarah, and Jamal, the owner of a print shop I had helped during COVID. I cooked simply arugula salad, roast chicken, roast potatoes, plus a bottle of red wine Jamal brought. Jennifer looked around. The new space makes you want to work right away. Marcus clinked glasses. To clarity. Sarah smiled, and to concise emails. Jamal told how he kept 12 jobs after I renegotiated his credit line. I didn't want to turn the dinner into a praise session, but one sentence from Jennifer stayed with me. You don't need to speak loudly. The people who need to know will know. Your files speak for you. Her words became reality in just a week. A friend of Jennifer's, the CFO of a retail company, called. I've heard you're good at turning cash flow around in tough quarters. We need to review inventory and logistics costs. Another message came from the Austin Women in Finance group. Anyone available for a 6-week project in distribution? Inbox. Priya nudged me into the conversation. I didn't advertise anything, just sent a 1-page summary. What's been accomplished? 3 lines of case study. No client names. Offers came. I chose 2 engagements. 1 6 weeks, 1 3 months. Carter & Co. needed staff. I posted for an assistant. On interview day, Melody walked in carrying a small notebook. I used to be an office manager at an architecture firm, handling schedules and invoices. I like tightening processes. I asked, What's your favorite hour of the day? She smiled. 8 a.m. Emails haven't exploded yet. I close tasks quickly. I asked, when someone says, send it when you can, what do you do? Melody. I ask exactly when so I can set a reminder. I nodded. You start tomorrow? Half time per week? Her eyes lit up. Shall I bring coffee? For the junior consultant position, I called David, a guy who had been a data analyst at a restaurant chain and had just been laid off. David said frankly, I don't know many terms, but I know how to open the books, read the columns, and ask why do it that way. I gave him a test. Here's a purchasing sheet for a small company, quantities and due dates. Review it in 48 hours and suggest 3 changes. 2 days later, he came back with 3 clear proposals. Shift ordering from Friday to Tuesday to avoid dead inventory. Separate the slow-paying customers group from the discount program. Instead of sending a reminder on the 30th, send it on the 21st with a prepayment option. I nodded. You're in. We moved the office from a shared space in East Austin to a small suite in a central tower. No need for expensive furniture. I set up a large table, 3 ergonomic chairs, 2 monitors, a long whiteboard, and a file shelf. From the window, you could see a corner of Ladybird Lake. Melody stuck the weekly schedule on the wall. Monday, inventory audit. Tuesday, vendor negotiations. Wednesday, cash forecast. Thursday, payroll review. Friday, reporting. We kept calm working hours, not torch-bearing all day. 8:30, a 15-minute meeting. Each person says 3 bullet points. Done. Doing. Need support. 5:30. Shutdown. Unless urgent. No theatrics. News from Ethan's side still came sporadically via polite emails. Harrison proposed a temporary framework agreement, brief, with terms respecting separate property and a schedule for arranging belongings. I edited a few words and signed. Ethan shifted to job hunting. His LinkedIn had removed the puffed-up bullets, the resume trimmed to 2 pages. One day, he sent exactly 1 line. I have taken down the wife earns less post on social media. I replied, received. I don't preach morals. I keep boundaries. Patricia was quieter too. She sent a single email admitting, I spoke too harshly. Sarah read it and said, no long response needed. 1 sentence of thanks and keep the conditions as they are. I wrote, thank you, Mom. From now on, everything stays by the paperwork. Finished. The new work began to find its rhythm. On the retail project, David and I were in the warehouse at 7 a.m., walking between the shelves, asking the stock manager, what spoils easily? He pointed right away. Fresh goods. 3 days and the plan breaks. David took notes. Melody at the office called suppliers to renegotiate delivery schedules. In the first week, transportation costs dropped 8%. The owner looked at the chart and exhaled. We can keep going. On the logistics project, I sat with the client's CFO, opened their messy cash flow file, and streamlined it into 4 tables: inflows, outflows, payables, receivables by week. I didn't present it fancy. I said, we stop items under 2% effectiveness this month. We pay the people who give us an extra 30 days. 4 weeks later, they were no longer late on payroll. I received a short email. Thank you for keeping the right people. Meanwhile, the penthouse not only looked better, it worked better. The yoga room helped me start the day with 20 minutes of breathing and stretching. I placed a small bell next to the mat. The first thing after finishing the routine is to strike it once, and only then open email. Melody noticed I was building this habit and she reminded me, don't touch mail before 7:30. I said, okay. On Friday evening, I again invited the Saw It From the Start group. This time, Priya brought curry, Marcus brought bread. David talked about his mother working the night shift, both proud and worried. Jennifer looked at me. Loop him into the Women in Finance Association. They have a mentorship program, even if he's not a woman. The whole table laughed. I was no longer obsessed with telling my story louder than the other sides. I rewrote Carter & Co.'s principles on an A4 sheet taped behind the door. 1. Documentation performance. 2. Respect other people's time and money. 3. No sugarcoating, no belittling, only accuracy. 4. When the day ends, go home. Each time we closed a project, I printed a before-after sheet. Before, where the client was blocked. After, what the cash flow looked like, whose signature, what was learned. I stacked them in a wooden box labeled Files That Speak. Sometimes, walking across the bridge back home, I glanced toward the complex where Patricia lived. I wasn't angry, like before. I just knew I wouldn't drop by without a reason. Boundaries are not high walls. They are a small rule sheet taped behind the door. Those who step across it show respect. Those who don't are invited to come back when they're ready. One afternoon, Melody asked, "Do you want to post the story from bookkeeper to CFO for hire on LinkedIn? I think it's inspiring." I shook my head. When needed, the files will speak. For now, we work. She nodded. Yes. And we returned to the whiteboard, to the lines. Done. Doing. Need support. Lines that seem small but carry the whole company forward. Late at night, I stood on the balcony, cool wind rising from the river. Below, the city was still bright. I thought back to Ethan's opening line. I can't live with a wife who earns less. 6 months after that line, I didn't need to answer with a war of words. I answered with a freshly painted room, a small team working steadily, contracts signed lawfully, and warm dinners with real people. Real value doesn't lie in titles. It lies in the things that, when placed on the table, require no further explanation. And if anyone asks, I only need to open the wooden box of files that speak, take out the sheet with the correct date and the correct signature, set it down, then offer them a bite of roast chicken still hot. That is enough. On Sunday morning, I sat on the mat in the new yoga room, a glass of water beside me, the window slightly open. I asked myself the thing that has kept coming back all week. Were my years of silence endurance or strategy? I remembered every time my dress was criticized as repeated. Every time I paid the bill without saying anything. Every time I heard the boss's wife used as a comparison template. I chose silence because I thought marriage needed quiet. But that quiet doesn't save anyone if it blurs the truth. I wrote down 2 lines. Be silent when there isn't enough data. Speak when there is a process. The rest is boundaries. At noon, Sarah stopped by with bread. She sat down in a chair and asked directly, "Do you regret having been silent for too long?" I smiled. Yes, but if I had raised my voice when my hands were empty, you'd probably be untangling even more right now. Sarah nodded. Then name it clearly. Not endurance, but not yet time to speak. From now on, schedule the talk before things go off track. I added another line to my notebook. Marriage check-in, cars date, time, topic. In the evening, Jennifer video called. She said, "Ava, you've done very well at keeping standards without bending other people, but you have one more segment. State clearly your definition of partner." I read aloud what I had just written. A partner is 2 people sharing tasks, sharing decisions, respecting each other's own pace, not forcing each other into an image. Jennifer smiled. That's the sentence you need to carry into every relationship from now on, whether in love or at work. Ethan texted, "Tomorrow I'll come by to pick up the wedding photo album." "Only the album," I replied. Okay. 6 p.m. The items are already set on the table. Do not open other cabinets. If you need anything else, email. He called back, his voice smaller than before. Thank you. I answered, yes. The call was short, but clear. I didn't feel triumphant, only lighter because there was a framework. That night, I called my parents in San Antonio. Mom asked, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm better because I know how I will live marriage if there is a next time." Dad asked, "How?" I replied, "Not turning each other into evidence for showing off. Money, housework, goals, write them down, review quarterly. If we differ, stop early, don't try to perform." Mom laughed. That's life, not a stage. I also thought of Patricia. I sent a polite, unbarbed line. Thank you, Mom, for sending the apology. I hope the upcoming meals will be places for decent conversation, not places to set a yardstick of being worthy. She only replied, received. I didn't expect anything more. A week later, the house was finished with the smell of fresh paint. Melody brought a wooden picture frame to place on the shelf. The photo of the whole group from the small celebration night. Marcus, Jennifer, Priya, Sarah, Jamal, David. I looked at the picture longer than usual. Family is not only people who share a surname. Family is the people who keep you upright when you want to bend just to get it over with. I closed the laptop and wrote 3 final lines for myself. 1. Marriage is a partnership, not a stage to prove status. 2. Healthy boundaries matter more than saving face. Those who respect boundaries stay. Those who don't stop. 3. Silence only makes sense when it prepares for a decent conversation afterward. I stuck the paper to the inside of the kitchen cabinet, the place I see every morning when I pour water. This time, it isn't to remind anyone else. It's to remind myself that from here on, I will live by what I've just written, not needing to speak loudly, but speaking at the right time. Dawn poured through the glass, the surface of Ladybird Lake gleaming like a clean mirror. I stood at the kitchen counter, poured a little more coffee, and listened as the machine's sound faded and then shut off. This penthouse is in my name from before the marriage. Paid on time each period. All the paperwork resting in the safe. No need to speak loudly, only to remember I have done things right. Others may impose a narrative for a while, but when the numbers, signatures, and process appear, everything returns to its proper place. If you are at the very moment of choosing between silence or speaking up, I'll share how I went through it. Be silent to prepare, speak when there is sufficient data, and let the record speak in place of emotions. Marriage is a partnership, not a stage. Healthy boundaries matter more than saving face. And mutual respect begins with the truth. I didn't defeat anyone. I only stopped losing to myself. Thank you for staying to the end of this story, for patiently going with me through each email, each receipt, each deep breath, so as not to say words that would hurt each other. Thanks to real friends, advisors who know how to listen, and audience members like you, I understand more clearly one thing. Quiet strength is always enough, as long as the records are clean, the boundaries clear, and you know when to tell the truth. If you've ever been underestimated for not being loud, try writing down one small thing you will do in the next 72 hours to regain the initiative. Create a milestones page. Put your documents back in order. Schedule a conversation with a clear topic. Comment below with the line, "I choose the truth," and say where you will start. I will read them all. And if this story helps you see your value more clearly, follow the channel so you don't miss the next journeys, where we continue building life with small but right decisions. Thank you. Wishing you a peaceful morning and a clear day of work.